In this video, we will discuss big push theory, and this is an important theory which is discussed in the literature of development economics. And big push theory is actually a part of the balanced growth rate approach, or it actually supports the framework of the balanced growth rate approach. So let us discuss big push theory in detail. And we know that in most of the developing economies are confronting with the problem of the coordination failure uh, because these underdeveloped or developing economies do not have a platform for coordinating the activities of different sectors and subsectors. And therefore, it is usually argued that there should be a balance and coordination among different sectors in developing economies. And unfortunately, the coordination is missing in developing economies, and this creates the problem of coordination failure. And Big Push is the most famous coordination failures model in development economics, and this has been pioneered by Paul Rosenstein-Rodin. And this model argues that industrialization is very essential for the developing economies to come out of the vicious circle of underdevelopment. But unfortunately, the coordination failure actually blocks or it works against industrialization. And therefore, Rodin argues that to create a market for industrial output, all industries should grow together. That means certain individual attempts of small doses of investment will not help the economy to come out of the vicious circle. Rather than that, what we actually require is a simultaneous investment in many of the significant sectors, means in the economy, so that a market for output grows along with an increase in production. The market alone would never yield such a big push. We know that if you leave everything to the market to create this big push, then that big push will not happen. Therefore, apart from the efforts from the side of the market, we need government planning, direct investments, and at the same time, certain controls being exercised on the economy by the government. So government planning cannot be ruled out in big push theory. That is also essential. At the same time, you cannot leave everything to the market, but market should also be accommodated in the process of development. So it's a very holistic approach where we seek the help of the market, we seek the help of the government and direct investments, and even we are trying to exercise certain controls over economic activities. That means big push is a holistic approach. It encompasses many things, and it is an attempt on the part of the whole system to have investment in many sectors simultaneously so that the economy is taken forward to the next step of the growth process. Now, this big push theory is based on certain assumptions. And first assumption is that there is only one factor of production, that is labor. Of course, the labor supply remains fixed. And the labor market has two sectors. One is the traditional labor market, and the other is a modern labor market. And we know that in traditional labor market, because of the availability of unskilled labor in large number, the wage rate may be less. But in the case of the modern sector, the wage rate is high because modern sector or industrial sector does not have enough supply of the skilled manpower. So they are trying to attract manpower to that sector. And because of that, the modern sector or industry sector might be offering a higher wage rate compared to the wage rate being offered in the traditional sector. And there are n type of products. N can take different numbers. It can be 50 or 100 or something like that. So there are n type of products. And in traditional sector, there is the operation of what is usually referred to as the constant returns. And constant simply means one worker produces only one unit of output. But in modern sector, there is operation of increasing returns where one worker may produce more than one unit of output. And there is a unit elasticity of demand. And if national income is Y and the number of product is N, then the consumer would spend Y upon N on each product. Uh, this function follows a Cobb-Douglas utility function with equal preference for all goods. That means if Y is increased, then naturally Y upon N, that much amount would be spent on each product. That means there is a unit elasticity of demand for product. If income is raised by 10%, and also there will be an increase in the demand by the 10%. That is how it could be described. And economy is a closed one. This is a usual definition which you can find in many of the models. And here also we assume that economy is a closed one, and there is perfect competition in traditional sector, but imperfect competition prevails in the modern sector. Because modern sector, you know that there may be many factors which prevent the operation of perfect competition in the modern sector. Because in modern sector, since industrialists rule the sector, there may be the coming up of monopolies, there may be the coming up of oligopolistic market structure, and all these things makes competition imperfect. But traditional sector consists of large number of producers, small producers, and a big number of buyers also. So perfect competition is likely to prevail in the traditional sector. Now we will discuss the need for big push. So why do we need big push? And big push is required because of these four important effects. One is urbanization effect, and second is infrastructure effect, and training effects, and intertemporal effects. Let me discuss each of these defects in a little bit detail. Now, what is urbanization effect? And we know that urbanization actually causes an increase in the demand for commodities, because these urban people do possess an enhanced real purchasing power because of an increase in income. And therefore, as urbanization takes place, there will be an increase in the demand for most of the commodities produced in the country. And therefore, it is said that to meet the growing demand for the people arising out of this urbanization effect, we need an increase in the investment or simultaneous investment in most of the most of the sectors in an economy. So this is what's called urbanization effect. So as the economy grows, urbanization is likely to rise, and to meet the growing demand for organization, we need a big push. Secondly, infrastructure effects. We know that if you have got an adequate infrastructure facilities in terms of power, roads, railways, etc., then this will definitely lead to a reduction in the cost of production. Suppose that we live in a country where there is the availability of all these infrastructure facilities, then definitely what happens is that each firm will experience a lower cost of production. And therefore, it is said that a big push is needed for the creation of these sufficient infrastructure facilities for the companies in a country. Then only there will be a situation where the companies enjoy a lower cost of production, thereby increasing their level of profit. And this will ultimately means induce these companies to expand investment in different areas, and this will also lead to what is called diversification. So second important effect, or second important reason why we require a big push is infrastructural effects. And third important effect is training effects. We know that laborers need to get trained to make them more productive in their own field. But we usually see that the firms on their own are unlikely to invest a lot of money for training purposes. And why do firms why do firms show a disinterest in investing a lot of money in training? Because they fear that after having been trained, these laborers may be enticed away, means by the other firms offering them higher wages. And perhaps because of this reason that many of the firms, while giving training to their employees, they enter into a contract with the employee that after getting trained, the employee will stay in the factory, stay in the company for a specified period of time. And this is because a fear on the part of the companies that the employees are likely to leave after getting trained. This is one reason. And also the people also do not want to get trained themselves. And because people, especially people living or staying in the traditional sector, they do not want to get trained themselves because they don't believe in getting acquainted with more skills and knowledge, because their jobs may not demand such type of skills. So there is a less demand for skill. There is a less demand for training. At the same time, the companies are also not interested to give the people more training and education. And because of these reasons, there is a mandatory public education and training, and this should be done by the government. So to do these kinds of training and other things, a big push is needed for this purpose. Now there is intertemporal effects, and we know that big push being the driver of the growth in many sectors, and that lead to the generation of aggregate demand in the economy. So if it means generation of aggregate demand, or if you invest in all sectors alike, then that will lead to increase in the generation of aggregate demand in the economy. Increase in aggregate demand combined with low wages in the traditional sector and it increase in pecuniary positive externalities, or as a result of this increase in aggregate demand combined with low wages in the traditional sector, pecuniary or measurable, monetarily measurable positive externalities will be generated. And this is because each firm's production has the effect of raising other firms' revenue, making them more profitable. So if there is an increase in investment in all sectors simultaneously, this will lead to an increase in aggregate demand in the economy, an increase in aggregate demand combined with low wages. And that will lead to the generation of pecuniary positive externalities. And because of this reason, we say that there should be big push, or there should be simultaneous investment in different core sectors. So to put it in a nutshell, we can argue that these are the four important reasons as to why an economy requires the need for a big push: the urbanization effect, infrastructure effects, training effects, and the intertemporal effects. Now, let me discuss the content of the big push theory in detail. The theory argues that any strategy of economic development that relies basically upon the philosophy of economic gradualism is bound to be frustrated. What does it mean? That means if you focus on a gradual development in the sense that small doses of investment in selective sectors leading to the culmination of a development exercise. That is what's called gradualism. But we know that this gradualism takes a long period of time. And gradualism may not be always successful because the small doses of investment sometimes may bring back the economy to the low-level equilibrium trap. And you might remember that earlier we discussed this low-level equilibrium trap. And in certain other videos dealing with this low-level equilibrium trap, we refer to conditions under which the companies could be brought back to the low-level equilibrium trap, even after having experienced a tremendous increase in investment, although of a small dose, and although of something being done in certain selective sectors. So gradualism in development process, or gradualism in the investment policies of the government, is something which is found to be not working in developing economies. So it is something frustrating as far as the developing economies are concerned. Therefore, what we really require is a big push to undo the initial inertia of the stagnant economy. And it is only then that a smooth journey of the economy towards higher levels of productivity and income can be ensured. So we need to undo the initial inertia of a stagnant economy, for which we need a big push, or we need an investment in different sectors, not in selective sectors, in different sectors. We need an investment in a reasonably big quantity or big size. We need an investment. The concept of big push is not a new one because it rests on the principle of the external economies. You can say that the big push is not is a modern version of the external economies. Then what are these external economies? External economies refer to benefits which accrue to the individuals and to the society when goods are produced on large scale. Simply put, this is a benefit which one gets because of large scale production. The concept of external economies was first used by Marshall, and since then it has assumed a great significance in the areas of production and development. The external economies have been termed as indivisibilities. This word is very important in the discussion of big push. This word is very important, indivisibilities, and their impact on development has been discussed below. So we will discuss the impact of development, impact of indivisibilities on development. Actually, the crux of the argument of this big push theory centers around this particular word, indivisibilities, and the impact of indivisibilities on development. According to Redan, the major hurdle in industrialization and development is the small size of the market. So our size of the market is very, very small. And because of the small size of the market, industries are unable to expand because they cannot find a good market for their products. And unless they find a good market for product, it would be very difficult for these companies to get a reasonable profit. And to overcome this, Rodan explains the role of indivisibilities. There are three kinds of indivisibilities. One is indivisibility in production function, and indivisibility of demand, indivisibilities in the supply of savings. So you can see three kinds of indivisibilities: indivisibilities in production function, indivisibility of demand, indivisibilities in the supply of savings. Let us see what is meant by indivisibilities in production function. So indivisibilities in production function refer to the indivisibilities of input, output, and production process. So indivisibilities in three areas: in input, output, and production process. Production process is a process through which input is transformed into output, or this is much related to the kind of technology, kind of machine which you are using. So in these three aspects, you can see some kind of indivisibility. Some input you cannot use in part by part. It should be used it should be used as a whole. And output, some kind of output you cannot produce in part by part. It should be supplied in its wholeness. And some production process you cannot use for producing a smaller amount. Some has to be used. Some production process you have to use for the production of a big size of output. That means in the case of input, output, and production process, we see some instances of indivisibilities. So that indivisibilities means in the production function, or indivisibilities in respect of input being used, output being produced, and the production process being applied. And that indivisibilities are usually referred to as indivisibilities in production function. And these indivisibilities lead to increasing returns, higher output, income, employment, and lowering of capital output ratio. Rodan says that social overhead capital, that is power, transport, communication, and housing, this is very important. And this is an important constituent of indivisibilities and external economies. The reason is that expansion of social overhead capital creates investment opportunities for various industries, which help in raising the level of investment. The expansion of social overhead capital generates excess capacity whose utilization could take the developing economies on a higher production level. The crux of the matter is that sustained economic development requires creation and expansion of social overhead capital, which in turn requires large amount of investment called lumpiness of capital. So we need large amount of investment in social overhead capital. It means in the construction of road, in the construction of power sector, in the construction of railways, port, airport, in the construction of the companies producing machines, you need a large amount of investment. So this requires a lumpiness of capital or lumpiness of investment being done in all these sectors. Lumpiness of capital creates external economies which pave the way for economic development. Now let come to the next indivisibility, which is called indivisibility of demand. Rodin has highlighted the importance of indivisibility of demand. The importance of indivisibilities of demand lies in the expansion of market. The small market limit the investment opportunities and obstruct the development process. So market size should be widened enough to meet the requirements of the industries. If your market size is small, then it does not yield any perceptible, any visible result. It does not yield if the market size is too small. Investment in any single project might involve risk and uncertainty as to whether the product will find a market or not. So if you invest in a particular product and start producing that product only, then it will create certain uncertainty because how many people will buy it? Because other sectors, people do not get any benefit from the other sectors. So how the people would buy the product of only one particular sector? So that sector producing the product will find it very difficult to market the commodities unless there is investment in the rest of the sectors. So investment done in one single project might involve a risk and uncertainty because they cannot sell it out. They cannot find a market for their products in other areas. The indivisibility of demand requires simultaneous investment in various industries, the stressing on the complementarity of investment. So investment should be complementary. Or investment done in one sector should be complementary to the investment done in other sectors. There should not be substitutes. You cannot do an investment in education as a substitute of investment being made in the health sector. The education investment and health investment must be complementary to each other. So that means investment must be done in a complementary manner rather than in a surrogate manner, so or substitute manner. That means investment must be complementary. Now, the output produced by a single firm in the market may not prove profitable, whereas the production by multiplicity of firms proves profitable. This proposition has been explained with the help of the next figure, which I will show you now. So output produced by a single firm, that will not be profitable. So if only one firm produces the output, then that will not be profitable. But if many of the firms join together and start producing the output, then that will come out to be more profitable. So this will be explained with the help of the next figure. So look at this figure. Horizontal axis shows the quantity and vertical axis shows the cost, revenue, and the price. And we have the first demand curve, that is the curve D0. And you can find that the corresponding marginal revenue curve is MR0, and you can go to the next demand curve. Let us take the next demand curve D1. Corresponding marginal revenue curve is MR1, and you can see the marginal cost curve. Marginal cost curve is given here. Okay, this is a marginal cost curve, this is the average cost curve, and this is the demand curve which we are considering right now, D1, and this is a corresponding marginal revenue curve of that. Okay, and this is the another demand curve D0, and this is a corresponding marginal revenue curve MR0. Let us take the first demand curve D0 and corresponding margin revenue curve MR0. So the firm is in equilibrium at this point. Okay, because at this point, marginal revenue curve cruises this marginal cost curve. Then you can find out the quantity of output produced at this point. This is Q0. And at what price the product is sold. To find out that, you can extend this dotted line to here, because this is the demand curve. And moving from here to here, you can find out the price, that is P1. So P1 is a price and Q0 is the output. Then how much profits they get? To find out that, you have to get the average cost. So at this point, the average cost is C. C is the average cost. Okay, C is the average cost. So you can find out now the difference. This is the price P0. P0 is a price and this is average cost. So you will get a profit equal to this much area. You will get a profit. So you will get a profit equal to this much area. Okay, this is your profit. Now let us suppose that some new firms come into the market. As a result of that, the demand for the commodity expands. So your demand curve now becomes D1. And given the demand curve D1 and corresponding marginal revenue curve MR1, your equilibrium point is here. Because at this point, marginal cost curve cuts this MR curve, and quantity produced has been raised from Q0 to Q1. Correspondingly, there is a decline, there is a slight decline in the price to P1, and this is the amount of profit which you are getting right now. Now, let us suppose that more firms have joined. Suppose that the number of firms has increased, say to 10. So now we have 10 firms. It has been increased to 10. So first we had only one firm, and from there we increased the firm, say to 2 or 3, and from there we have increased the number of firms to 10. So this is the demand curve with the 10 firms in the economy. Corresponding marginal revenue curve is MR10. This is also the corresponding marginal revenue curve of this demand curve. Now the equilibrium is established at this point, and therefore we are producing Q10 amount of output, and the price is P10 and the cost is C. So your profit now has been raised to this level. So this area shows your profit. That means compared to a situation where we had only a few firms, now the profit has gone up from that level to this much level. I will shade this once again. I will show you the profit. Okay, this is a new profit which the firms are increasing. This is a new profit. Okay, what does it mean? The profit has been raised. The profit has been raised consequent upon an increase in the demand for the commodity. So this clearly shows this fact that the output produced by a single firm in the market may not prove profitable, whereas the production by multiplicity of firms proves profitable. So if multiple firms produce commodities and sell, then there is a profit. There is a possibility of increase in the profit. So that is what is explained here. This shows the significance of indivisibility of demand. Now, this is explanation of the figure. Now we will come to another important indivisibility, which is called indivisibility in the supply of the savings. So I have just left one more slide. So this is about the same thing which I have talked in the last figure. So here in this figure we also note that government intervention and participation in invest program is considered necessary for the success of big push. That means big push cannot alone done by the private sector, and it can hardly be done by the government alone also. We need a joint effort of both the private sector and the public sector government in the case of the big push. So government intervention is also it is also called for, or it is also required for the success of the big push. Government intervention is also required, and participation of the government in investment program, and these are very important along with private investment. These are also very important for the success of the big push. That's what's explained in this slide. Now, let us come to the next indivisibility. This is indivisibility in the supply of savings. In underdeveloped countries or UDCs, you know that level of saving is low because of a low level of national income. To generate savings, it's very important that a gap between income and expenditure should be created and savings should be raised. And at the same time, sustainable mechanism be devised to channelize savings in development activities. So there should be a gap between the consumption expenditure and income. Then only, because saving is the difference between income and consumption. That means income must be higher than expenditure or consumption. Then only there will be what's called a positive saving. So we need some efforts on the part of the government to widen the gap between income and expenditure so that saving is maximized or increased. At the same time, we must have a mechanism by which you can convert the saving into investment. So if saving remains idle, then it will not contribute to investment. So saving needs to be converted into investment. So for that, we should have a mechanism, and that what is usually done with the help of the financial market, because financial institutions and financial markets are there to convert the saving into investment. The desired objective of growth and prosperity can be realized when savings are invested. So this is very important. The growth and prosperity can be realized when savings are invested in the productive pursuits which promote development and employment. So that's very important. Now, besides these three indivisibilities, another important factor connected with development is the creation of psychological indivisibilities. It implies that a proper psychological environment conducive to economic development should be created. That means people must have a mindset. People must have a social attitude, character to emphasize development and growth process. So that's very important. Progressive institutional framework should be evolved to mold the people's psychology. That's very important. That is, again, we are stressing this. Progressive institutional framework should be evolved to mold the people's psychology in the direction of development. They should be they should be made to put in a big efforts. So psychology of the people, that's also very important in big push strategy. Now we will discuss the critical appraisal of the big push strategy. The first problem the ground on which this theory stands criticized is the neglect of the shortage, because the theory is built on the premise that we have enough money to invest in all sectors. So as you know, the big push theory calls for making investment in all sectors simultaneously. But from where can you find the fund to invest in all sectors simultaneously? Is it possible for developing economies to have enough fund to invest in all sectors simultaneously? So the big push approach actually does not take into account the shortage of fund, the shortage problem, the shortage of fund or shortage of capital problem. It does not take care of. That is an important point on which this theory stands criticized. Next is, there is a danger of inflation. When you invest in all sectors simultaneously, there must be some kind of a gap between aggregate demand and aggregate supply. When aggregate demand exceeds aggregate supply, price is likely to go up. And as price increases, then it will create inflationary pressures in the economy, and which will have certain negative effect, means later on. The economy later on will be experiencing some kind of negative effect thanks to this inflationary pressures being brought about by an excess of aggregate demand over aggregate supply. So this can happen in the economy. So this is one important reason or one important ground on which this theory stands criticized. Now, the external diseconomies, when you talk, means big push theory is based on the argument of external economies. But we may have to encounter a situation of external diseconomies because of this means widening of output, producing output in large scale, investing in all sectors alike. That will give us an impetus for growth, that will give us a push for our growth strategies. Or we believe that these kinds of exercise will yield certain economies of scale. But at the same time, this may produce certain diseconomies of scale as well. And these economies of scale are not favorable to companies. This will create a lot of problems. But the theory does not say anything about the diseconomies of scale. External diseconomies of scale can also happen in an economy. So the big push theory assumes that simultaneous development of industries would create indivisibilities of external economies. But there could be a possibility that in the short run, each firm might pay higher wages to skilled workers and thus create external diseconomies for each other. So when you have to pay more to the skilled worker, this is going to create external diseconomies rather than economies. So this aspect means does not seem to have been means addressed by the big push theory. Now, the big push theory does not take much care in respect of the development of the agriculture sector. The theory of big push emphasizes on the lumpiness of investment in different industries, such as capital goods, not exactly in the agriculture sector. So this is one important means a point one important disappointment that this big push theory gives us because it actually neglects the importance of agriculture sector. Now, problems of coordinations. So of course, the big push theory tries to avoid the problem of coordination because it's a coordination failure model, in the sense that it addresses the issues of the coordination and it argues that there should be coordination among different sectors. But unfortunately, it's very difficult to ensure the coordination of different complex sectors, and in a complex development plans, how can we ensure this coordination? Sometimes the problems of coordination are beyond the competence of strong and effective administrative machinery. This often happens in the case of economies like India, because we are such a huge sized economy, huge sized in the sense that our geographical area is too wide, and the population growth or population itself is too big, too large, where we find it very difficult to control each and everything, coordinate each and everything. So the geographical size of the economy and the size of the population, all these things put certain constraints on the part of the government and the development process to have a coordinated efforts means among different sectors, among different economic agents. And this problem of coordination has been one of the weakest point of the planning machinery. Now, economies are cost reducing and not output expanding. Sometimes the big economies of scale can lead to certain cost reduction and not output expanding. The big push theory explains the cost reduction aspect and ignores the output expansion aspect. Jacob Weiner has pointed out that economies generally result in reducing the cost rather than expanding the output. So they result in the reduction of the cost rather than expanding output. But this opinion of Jacob Weiner can be taken as a criticism against the big push theory. Now, the theory ignores the other factors like honesty, efficient administration, price stability, reforms, technology. So these aspects have also been neglected by this theory. And possibility of small investment not discussed, because some people talk about the relevance of small push instead of big push. Some people rule out the significance of big push. They say that small push may also work sometimes. J.H. Adler has criticized the theory on the ground that the theory ignores the importance of small investment. He says that even small push can set the bar of economic development rolling. So you can make the process of economic development running or rolling with the help of even the smart push. Small is beautiful. We have heard of these important phrases like small is beautiful. So smart push can even do miracles for an economy. And because this has been proved by the certain Asian tigers, means especially the not means Asian tigers have shown it, and China has been one of the best example of how the smart push can lead to a better economic development, because we know that MSMEs, micro, small, and medium enterprises have shown miracles in Chinese process. MSMEs are small pushers or small doses of investments. So instead of big push being made, or instead of big quantity of investment being made in different sectors, you can also go in for the development of MSMEs. And development of MSMEs can also foster development in an economy. So we criticize the big push theory on the ground that even the smart push can do wonders for, or can do miracles for an economy, for the development of a country. And this, with this, we end this discussion here.